Hola mis Anabellas and welcome back to the channel. So today is the long-awaited return of a certain type of video here on the channel. And if you guys have been here for a while, you guys know precisely what I am talking about. And that is, of course, the paranormal, conspiracy, supernatural type of videos that I used to do here on my channel. So if you are new, hello, my name is Annabelle, and previously when I had first started my channel, and even last year, not really that long ago, I had done a lot of conspiracy videos, paranormal videos, supernatural videos, things of the unexplained, things that are just super interesting to me in those fields and those topics. And I basically stopped making those types of videos. But I am finally back and I'm extremely excited to be getting back to doing this. All my previous, mostly all of my previous paranormal videos, all of my conspiracy videos, the supernatural, unexplained, all of this, it is gone, it is down. They are no longer up on the channel, and that is because we are completely restarting this whole series. So it will no longer just be like conspiracy time. That's how I previously had it in the past. It is now going to encompass everything. So conspiracy time, the supernatural, the unexplained, the paranormal, all of this, you know, the extraterrestrial, all of that, it is now all going to be part of one. And I'm extremely excited because, as I had mentioned in a previous video when I mentioned, these are finally coming back. I was very displeased with my work and the content that I had created previously. I felt like it didn't show what I had to offer, and the topics as well. I feel like I didn't cover them well enough. So finally we are back with today's video. And today's video, it is going to be a very, very interesting topic. It's a place that I find extremely interesting. Many people find this place extremely interesting. So without further ado, let's dive right into Skinwalker Ranch. So first, we are going to dive into a little bit of the history, a little bit of the background of Skinwalker Ranch. And I also do want to mention how I first heard of Skinwalker Ranch. So before we dive into any of the details, I first heard and saw of Skinwalker Ranch actually, I believe it was like roughly 6 years ago, 2017-ish. I was watching one of my favorite shows, Ghost Adventures, and one of the destinations that they were going to in that year's season was Skinwalker Ranch. Now, I had never heard of Skinwalker Ranch, no clue, no idea, but they went there, and Ghost Adventures, they typically cover, you know, paranormal things. But this video, this episode grouped in a lot of different things, and I was just astounded because, of course, things were captured on camera there. Things, unexplainable things were also captured. You know, they experienced paranormal activity there. They experienced UFO activity, so just unidentified flying objects. That doesn't necessarily mean that it was, of course, aliens or anything like that. Just things that they cannot explain in the air. They experienced that. They experienced possible skinwalker activity. So, you know, we have the cryptids and the creatures and the monsters, you know, those kinds of things. All of this was converging here all at once during an episode, and I was just astounded. So it really did kickstart my fascination into the place, and that's why I thought, you know what, the first video to start this whole thing back up on the channel, I think it should be Skinwalker Ranch. I haven't even done one previously, so I think it's time that they get the recognition they deserve here. So without further ado, now let's jump right into the background and the history of Skinwalker Ranch first. Now, I do have my computer and a notebook here just so I can stay on track. That's one of the things that I wanted to do better from the previous ones. So Skinwalker Ranch, everybody. So this is a 500 acre, roughly 500 acre property that is located in eastern Utah, specifically in the Uintah County. So around the 1970s, the Uintah Basin, that's where Skinwalker Ranch is. So it's in the Uintah County, but also specifically the Uintah Basin. So the Uintah Basin was actually getting a lot of nationwide attention. And that was because lots of reports and articles, coverage of the area was coming out saying that lots of the people, lots of the residents, the citizens there, they were experiencing paranormal activity, but specifically just unidentified objects that they're seeing in the sky. So UFOs are the big thing. So lots of supernatural and paranormal activity was reaching the mainstream media, and lots of people were starting to get interested in this area. Again, this is the 70s. So even back then, yes, especially back then, it was very difficult for people to come out with these kinds of things, because once you come out with I think I saw something, I might have seen a UFO, I might have seen a creature that I cannot, it's an unidentified creature. It's not some animal that is around right now, I see something that's shape-shifting, things moving on their own, poltergeist activity. People really did think that you were a bit crazy back then. And although things have gotten much better in current times, it's a lot easier to speak freely and openly about this. It is still difficult, but back then it was extremely difficult. So these kinds of reports were on the rarer side, but not unheard of. So that then leads to when Skinwalker Ranch was first mentioned and appeared in the mainstream media. So Skinwalker Ranch first appeared in 1996. And the early coverage of the ranch mentioned that the then owners, the Shermans, keep in mind, okay, we're going to go over the history of the ranch. So there are quite a few owners, but the Shermans are the big ones that you will have to focus on, because they are the ones who really bring to light their experiences here on the property and on the ranch. So the then owners, the Shermans, were experiencing a lot of strange and frightening activities. So that is what then brought Skinwalker Ranch into the mainstream media. And this was really not that long ago. 1996, we're in 2023. It was not that long ago that Skinwalker Ranch first appeared and became publicly known, publicly renowned in a way, It wasn't that long ago. Now, before we do dive into the strange occurrences and all of the activity that the Shermans were experiencing, I think it's best that we, of course, look at the history. Let's go back a little bit. We got to go back a little bit. The story of Skinwalker Ranch does not begin just with the Shermans. So let's go back a little bit. All right. So Skinwalker Ranch is located on what was previously Native American land. Now, for those of you who are new to the channel, I believe that Native American land is extremely charged. There's a lot of energy there, and I feel that I have a very open mind. I'm very open to lots of things, and I do believe in the sort of magic kind of aspect, or whatever it is that you would classify it as. There's definitely a lot of energy and a lot of activity going on Native American land, and previously Native American land that was then, of course, stolen and taken away from the Native Americans. I do think that when there's such tragic events, it charges the land even more, and especially when, during those time periods when, say, the shaman or someone powerful in the tribe would curse, per se, the land or the people. I do believe that does work, and there's like some sort of I don't know. See, I don't know what you would call it. And of course, it's unexplained. It's unexplained. We have no answers. And then, of course, we don't have any, like, significant, like, this is proof of this. But I do believe in this kind of stuff, and I do believe that it works. And I do believe that lots of Native American land is highly, highly charged, and lots of activity goes on for a multitude of reasons. So I just want to say that because, of course, Skinwalker Ranch was previously Native American land. So I do believe that that is extremely, extremely important. And it could be one of the factors that causes it to experience the things that it is experiencing today, and in what it experienced, in 1996. So it could be a factor, is what I'm saying. But as we said, it was previously Native American land. So in the 1930s, Kenneth and Edith Myers, they leased a home on the property. Eventually, over time, they would buy the rest of what we know today as Skinwalker Ranch from the other people who already owned the property, or who had, other homes just on the property that we know today as Skinwalker Ranch. They slowly bought the whole thing that we know today as Skinwalker Ranch. So the previous owners before the Shermans were Kenneth and Edith Myers. So what is truly interesting, though, is that I want you guys to also pay attention to this. Kenneth and Edith Myers, they owned Skinwalker Ranch for 6 decades. So from the 30s to the 90s, of course. As we know, 1996 is the year that Skinwalker Ranch is brought into mainstream media. So for 6 decades, 60 years, the Myers actually didn't experience, as far as we know, any activity of any sorts. No paranormal activity, supernatural activity, no cryptids, creatures, UFOs, nothing. They did not experience anything while they were living there. And pay attention to this as well. Kenneth's brother, he actually worked on the ranch with his brother who owned the ranch. He worked on it with cattle and so. And he even said in an interview that I never experienced anything, and my brother and his wife, Kenneth and Edith, they never experienced anything. They never told me they experienced anything. And again, for 6 decades, no activity was ever reported, documented, anything on the ranch. And I do think that is quite an interesting thing, because we will talk about this later, the skepticism of, is what's happening at Skinwalker Ranch real or is it fake? And this is one of the things that many people do fall back to, is that before the Shermans, nothing was really happening. Nobody said anything. The Myers, they didn't experience anything themselves. So what's going on with the Shermans? The Shermans case is very suspicious. It's very interesting. We don't know what's going on. But before them, nothing was reported. So that is an extremely interesting, important detail in this whole story, the history of the ranch. So after Kenneth and Edith had passed, the rights of the property did go to the brother that I just mentioned. That went to Kenneth's brother. And then Kenneth, he sold the ranch to Terry and Gwen Sherman. So in 1994, the ranch was then sold to the Shermans, and they established the Sherman Ranch. So before it was known as Skinwalker Ranch, it was Sherman Ranch. So Terry and Gwen, they moved onto the property along with their 2 kids. As far as we know, we don't know anything about Kenneth and Edith having children, but we do know that Terry and Gwen, they lived there with their 2 kids. So once they had moved, they also brought their herd of cattle. So they were cattle farmers. Cows was their thing. That's what they did. So according to the Shermans, according to them themselves, as soon as they arrived, strange activity began on the property. And this is where we bring Skinwalker Ranch into mainstream media. All that we know about what the Shermans had experienced comes from the momentous article that did bring Skinwalker Ranch into mainstream media. So, in 1996, Desert News released an article titled "Frequent Flyers," dedicated specifically to that, to the Shermans, only what they had to say and what they experienced. And it detailed all of the weird occurrences that they had happening on the ranch that they themselves did share. So there are, of course, probably things that they did not share, but they did indeed share quite a few things. Now, I do want to mention that the article is actually still available publicly for anyone to go and see, and it is very easily found. So if you just go online and look up Desert News, Frequent Flyers, you can actually find the entire article and the report. It's not necessarily that long, but it is a read. It is a read. So they did, as I said, they detailed a couple of the experiences, the occurrences that happened to the Shermans, and I will not be going over all of them. There was just, quite a few. So I'm not going to be going over all of them. So if you are interested and you want to look further into this, I do recommend going to look it up. It is available online, which is really great because anyone can access it. So if you want to go see it, of course, go look up Desert News, Frequent Flyers, and you'll have access to the entire article. So as I said, I'm only going to be picking a few of the instances which they did mention that I'll be covering. So without further ado, let's get into this. But of course, before that, I do want to mention one more time, this article was the one to break the news to the public and bring attention to the ranch. This is the first known, report of Skinwalker Ranch. This is the first one. Now, one of the experiences that I found most fascinating is that they have seen and recorded circular doorways in the sky. That's extremely interesting to me. Circular doorways. So what they said is that from those doorways they have seen lights or orbs emerge and enter through those circular doorways in the sky. Now, I find this so interesting because there's just so many unexplained things that we do not know. We don't know. We don't have the answer to none of this. And this circular doorways and the lights and the orbs, I think obviously one of the theories is, of course, the lights, the orbs, the circular doorways. It's a portal. It's some way for, say, UFOs to travel and, travel faster and appear here in our airway, our space, and all of that. And that is a great one. That's one that I always love. I love UFOs and aliens and all of that. But another thing is, like I said, these lands, previously Native American lands, they're charged. They're highly charged. There's a lot of activity and things that can happen and do happen on these lands. And one of the things is that this could potentially also be, hear me out, it could potentially be like a warp between dimensions, I think. Again, it's a highly charged area. So per se, let's just say that other dimensions, there's a multiverse and everything. I think it could be a warp also where we're kind of we're able to kind of see each other for a second, but we see them as orbs or lights in the sky, and they might notice us, they might not, but I think it's an interesting thing to have portals opening, in the sky. Again, technology could be extremely advanced for some alien civilizations, so it could be that, but also there has to be multiple, theories. And that's another one. And that's another one because, again, these lands are supercharged. So I don't know why, this energy, all this energy here couldn't create something like that, an interdimensional kind of portal, but like a warp, because we're obviously not meant to see that. So it could be that. And then also a common kind of theory that has been popping up recently in the past few years is that UFOs aren't necessarily aliens, but they're time travelers. So that could also be one. It could also be that these circular doorways are possibly portals from the future. And what we're seeing, the orbs, the lights, they are flying objects, unidentified flying objects, but they could just be, the tubes or the vehicles that they choose to time travel with. So that's a very interesting thing. I do really love all three theories, but who knows? So that's just one of the experiences that they had. Another one is what Skinwalker Ranch is really truly known for, and that is the cattle mutilations. Now, I do want to go ahead and say warning for anyone who's a little bit squeamish. I am not going to throw up any pictures by the way of cattle mutilations because for me also it is pretty difficult to look at. But I will be speaking about cattle mutilations from here on until pretty much the end of what I have to say because it is synonymous with Skinwalker Ranch. Skinwalker Ranch is known for this. They are tied with this. They're like this, like that with cattle mutilations. So if anyone's squeamish, just a little warning. I might mention some details maybe you don't want to hear or all of that. Just a little warning. So again, cattle mutilations are one of the well-known, frequent occurrences that happen here on Skinwalker Ranch, and they happen up to present day, today. So the Shermans, they themselves said that when they had a UFO sighting, they would soon find a mutilated cow or a cow disappearing. And this is another one of the things which, is why the alien theory is extremely strong for Skinwalker Ranch. It's that it could be that aliens are testing cows. We really don't have the answers to this. So I'm going to leave it right there because I am going to bring up cattle mutilations a little bit later. And then I will mention some details, but I do want to mention that cattle mutilations, a big thing during the Sherman's time, a big thing today. So it was also really interesting to hear that apparently other ranchers in the Uinta Basin had also had mutilations happening at their properties, at their ranches, but they never spoke out about it. They spoke to the Shermans about it, apparently, according to the Shermans, and that's why they themselves have told Desert News about this. And again, this was like the 1990s, 20 years after the 70s when I told you that the Uinta Basin was getting a lot of attention drawn to it. But even then, the 90s, people would look at you a bit strange if you were to come out with such a report. So I do believe that if other mutilations were happening on other ranches, that they kept it kind of to themselves because they didn't want to be ridiculed. They didn't want to be called out as crazy or anything. I understand that. But at the same time, it would have been really nice if they had come out because the Shermans came out, and the Shermans are essentially kind of telling their story apparently for them. So it would have been nice to have the other ranchers come out and kind of corroborate and go like, yeah, that happened to us, and we know that this is happening to the Shermans as well. It would have been nice, but again, I understand why people didn't come out to say this is true. It's understandable. But that is, of course, what the Shermans had said. And another one of the big events is, of course, the frequent UFO sightings. So, UFO sightings in the Uinta Basin, common. They are so frequent, it's like seeing a bird fly by. Like, that is how common it is in the Uinta Basin. So, it wasn't unusual at all for sightings to happen for the ranch. So, the UFO sightings is definitely not anything that people question about Skinwalker Ranch, because there are UFO sightings all across this area, and other people who live there, they see it. They know what's going on. So the UFO thing isn't really anything that anyone doubts. So for them, it's definitely like a common thing, and nobody was like, that's weird. The one thing that was interesting, though, is that what makes the ranch really special is just the staggering amount of UFO sightings that they do have, and then also the frequency at which they happen. So it was reported that in the 90s, when the Shermans owned the ranch, about 10% of the Uinta Basin population reported seeing UFOs. 10% is quite a high number, especially in the 90s. You know, that is quite a large amount of people coming out and saying, I saw a UFO. And, you know, I want to say props to them, to that 10%. You know, you really don't have anything to gain from this. You have a lot to lose from kind of coming out and saying this, because people can call you crazy. And, you know, you can become the laughingstock, a joke, and all this stuff. You don't have anything really to gain. So to that 10% who did come out and say stuff, props to you guys. You guys are really strong. But also, I do want to say that the number could be the real number, percentage of people who have seen UFOs could be far larger, or it could be far larger, because again, there are then the people who don't come forward, who are afraid to report these kinds of things. They don't come forward because they're afraid of, you know, what I just said. They don't want to be ridiculed. They don't want to be called crazy. They don't know what could happen to them. They could lose their job. They could lose their family. Like, there's just so many things that could happen when you come out with such a thing, you know? And so the number could be way higher. But of course, we will never know that, unfortunately. This was the 90s. We're in the 2020s. Like, you know, it's unfortunate, but I do think the number was quite a bit higher. So the Shermans, they reported that their UFO activity was way higher than normal. And again, this brought lots of eyes to the ranch. The ranch was like on a lot of people's radars. And it's, you know, you could say it was kind of like, when are they going to give up the ranch? You know, when are they going to give it up and sell it? Because obviously they're not having a great time here. So a lot of eyes were on the ranch, possibly looking to purchase it as well. Now, they said that multiple different types of UFOs a day could be seen, and they said that they had seen UFOs so often that they had the crafts memorized. Like, they know all the different types of crafts. They're like, oh yeah, that's the cigar-shaped one. It's coming by to visit again. Here it is. And I find that fascinating and like super interesting, because they did not mention like how frequently they came. They just said it was so frequent that they knew, like, oh yeah, there's that craft again. Like, we saw that one 30 times already. You know, like, they were seeing these things at a really high rate. And I really I wish we could know like how often, because in my mind, I'm going like, maybe you saw 3 UFOs a day or something. But what if they mean like, you know, we saw 10 plus a day? That's a large number. And that's a kind of like, it's also kind of like a crazy number. Like, that's quite high, but it's possible. it is possible. But yeah, they said they saw so many that they just knew the crafts by now. Like, oh yeah, like imagine you can just be like, yeah, there goes Tim's craft. Tim is visiting again. Like, that's so interesting to me. But yeah, that's how many UFOs they said that they saw. The fact, to the point where they knew them. They were like, yeah, we know it. So I found that really interesting. And one more encounter that I do want to mention, again, I'm only picking a few of these that they mentioned in the article and that the article covered. So if you do want to go to read more, again, go to Desert News. You can find that article online, frequent flyers, easily accessible. You don't even have to pay a subscription or anything. It's free for the public. So if you want to go look at other occurrences, instances, encounters that they had, you can go visit that. But I'm going to do one more encounter that they had, and this one is a big one. So one more encounter that they had, which is fascinating to me and to many, many other people, is that one day they saw a wolf-like creature, and that wolf-like creature was around their cattle. So of course, to protect their cattle, Terry, he then got a gun, shot the creature, but it appears like the bullets did not harm the wolf-like creature at all. And literally, the wolf creature just went away. That's what Terry says. It just walked off, went away, And then after that, he said that this horrible smell was left in the area. And I know, you're thinking it was probably just like a coyote or a wolf or fox, something. But this encounter is significant because it details the very creature that the ranch is actually named after. Possibly. Not for sure, not certain, but it's possible that this was actually a skinwalker. So as we've been saying, this is Skinwalker Ranch, and this is where the name finally starts to appear. So before we do continue though, I do want to go ahead and actually kind of go over what a skinwalker is, because a skinwalker could honestly have its own video. And if you guys do want to see a video on just skinwalkers, let me know, because they are a whole thing in themselves. But I do have to go over it just so we know what we're dealing with here, and of course, what is the ranch named after? A skinwalker. So let's cover that. You guys ready for this? Because a skinwalker, this is quite the creature, okay? So skinwalkers, they come from the Navajo, but it is also present in other Native American tribes. It's just more well known, and it's pretty integral kind of to like the Navajo culture. So the Navajo version of this is called, look, if I don't pronounce it well, correct me in the comments, everybody. I don't believe I will pronounce it correctly, but let's do this. It's called a Yinaldlushli. I hope I said that correctly. If not, go ahead, let me know. But a Yinaldlushi. And that translates to, with it, he goes on all fours. So, how does one become a skinwalker? Well, in order to become a skinwalker, a person, they must commit a heinous act. So typically that ends up being the killing of a family member. And from that, they gain the ability to shapeshift into an animal. And as you guys heard me say with the translation, it is, with it, he goes on all fours. Typically, what a skinwalker, what they will shapeshift into is an animal that is on all fours. So this typically does encompass coyotes, wolves, foxes, those kinds of predatorial animals on 4, those kinds. But they can technically transform into any animal. But the thing is, they will, of course, shapeshift and wear the skin of that animal that they need for their task. And that is why they're called skinwalkers. Now, the thing is, these people, they voluntarily choose to become skinwalkers, you know, and they give into like this evil energy or like the evil side of magic. Again, I think Native American land and just like their culture and what they practice, it's extremely charged. Lots of energy there, you know, lots of good energy. But then of course there always has to be some kind of like bad energy. So the skinwalkers are kind of like giving into that and doing that in a sense. So the skinwalkers, besides the shape-shifting, they're said to have many more powers apparently. And I was actually kind of surprised when looking this up because I hadn't actually heard this before. But apparently they have the powers of mind reading. Yeah. Controlling animals of the night. And calling up spirits of the dead. They're like an all-powerful being. And if I came across a skinwalker, I know that I would not want to do anything to upset the skinwalker because this person, this individual, this creature is like all powerful. That's a lot of powers. But of course, I'm not 100% certain if like these other powers, you have to become more skilled or so to reach them, because what I know the skinwalkers for is the shape-shifting. I feel like that's what most people know them for. So I feel like these other powers that they have, let me know. Especially let me know if you are from a Native American tribe or you're Navajo. Let me know, like, how common are the other powers? Because the shape-shifting, every skinwalker apparently does have it. But these other ones, they're a bit, you know, on the unknown side for, I think, the powers that a skinwalker can have. So let me know if any of you do have any information on that. But for the most part, they are also invincible. So I mean, I would not do anything to a skinwalker. Like, I come across one, I'm not upsetting one. So here's the catch. The skinwalkers, they must continue to kill. And if they don't, they die. So it's kind of like, you know, you have to stay, you chose this evil side of the magic, of the energy. You need to keep doing that. If, like, once you've made your decision, there's no going back. So that's why, you know, for example, the Shermans, they saw this type of creature around their cattle. It was most likely getting ready to pounce on them and do what it had to do to stay alive. So here are the ways to identify a skinwalker. It seems like it's really only one way, and that is their eyes. So what you need to look for is a human with animal eyes or an animal with glowing red eyes. So I know that one is the most common one, how most people, especially like here at Skinwalker Ranch, how they're able to, in a sense, identify a skinwalker is that they see an animal with red eyes. That seems to be the most frequent one, because I feel like a human with animal eyes is a lot more difficult to like see and decipher and be like, that's a skinwalker. But when you see an animal with like glowing red eyes, I feel like that's why it's so much easier to identify them when they have shapeshifted, you know? So that's that. But again, I do want to go into this past once more, that it was Native American land. So I mentioned before that it was previously Native American land, but I had not mentioned which tribe it belonged to, but I'm here to mention it now and go into a little bit of that history. So this Skinwalker Ranch, it used to be Ute land. So of course, everybody, if you are not familiar, Utah is kind of like named after the Ute tribe, Utah, the Ute. And then the University of Utah, they're the Utes. So the Utes are very present in Utah and like all the culture, and here they are. So we're going back a little bit, people. We're going back a little bit. So the Utes, they joined the US and expelling the Navajo. Again, the Skinwalkers come from the Navajo culture. But it is present in other tribes as well. But it is tied closely to the Navajo. So the Utes, they joined the US in expelling the Navajo from the Four Corners area. So the Four Corners are the 4 states. Don't ask me right now because I feel like I know 3 of them, and for some reason I think I'm missing one. Correct me if I'm wrong. I might correct myself right now. But I believe it is Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado. I believe those are the 4 corners. I'm not 100%, but I hope I'm correct. I believe those are the 4 corners. I might be wrong, but I'm hoping that is the 4 corners. But yeah, they had joined them in expelling them from the Four Corners area. And before they expelled them, the Utes believed that the Navajo cursed them and the lands. So here's what I've been saying from kind of the start. These lands and like Native American, they're just, it's so charged energy, all this stuff. And here we go. So the Utes believe that the Navajo cursed them and the land. And they believe that they intentionally left skinwalkers in the area, you know, as part of this, to go against the Utes. And that is the reason why the Utes no longer want to be near the Skinwalker Ranch. And that's also why they choose not to go near Skinwalker Ranch. So I think, you know, it's interesting. It's very fascinating. And again, these lands, they are very, very charged. I just don't know how to explain it, but these lands, you know, they are something else. So this could be, you know, a factor that is part of why what is experienced there is experienced there. So now that we know about skinwalkers, you are of course able to draw your own conclusions on if the Shermans had potentially seen a skinwalker or not. I feel like the interaction was too short-lived, or at least they didn't give us any more details. But from what we do have, I think it is potentially, you know, a skinwalker. It could be one. It could be one. It also could not be one. But it's potentially, you know, it could be a skinwalker. It could have been one. So now, after this article and all this news came out about the ranch, again, lots of attention was on this ranch. And one person in particular, they were intrigued by what the Shermans had, you know, said and what they had experienced and revealed was happening to them on this ranch. And that is none other than Robert Bigelow. Now, Robert Bigelow, he's the founder of Bigelow Aerospace and a wealthy, wealthy man, almost a billionaire, actually. but multi-millionaire. He's almost a billionaire. He heard of the Sherman's experience, of course, and he decided he's going to make his move on the ranch. So, just mere weeks after the article had dropped, Robert Bigelow went ahead and he bought the property from the Shermans. And he is, from then on, the owner of Skinwalker Ranch. So the Shermans only had the ranch for 2 years. The Myers had it for 6 decades, and now Skinwalker Ranch has fallen into Robert Bigelow's hands. So the timeline and, the way that things are progressing is very interesting. Very interesting. So quickly after purchasing this ranch, Bigelow, he then moved scientists onto the property to begin doing research. He wasted no time. He was like, we're going to get to this right now. We're going to get down to the bottom of this if we can. And that's what he began to do. So he put observation posts all around the property and 24-hour surveillance, like literally the day that they moved onto the ranch. Everything went up in no time. It was like, like night and day. There it is. This is Skinwalker Ranch now, everybody. Sherman Ranch, no longer. Skinwalker Ranch, yes. Very fast. So, Bigelow and his scientists, they were prepared to see and capture evidence of what the Shermans claimed was going on. And sure enough, they got it. Evidence of this unexplainable activity was caught quickly, shortly after the move on to the property. So the 24-hour surveillance that they had, they put some of them to the sky, actually, because of the really frequent UFOs that the Shermans said that they were seeing, and then the reputation that the Uinta Basin has garnered, as a UFO hotspot. They were like, let's put these cameras up to the sky. So they did that. And quickly, they began to see lights in the sky. Shortly after the lights in the sky, unidentifiable animals with strange eyes were also spotted across the entire property. So again, could this be the Skinwalker? It could be. They have strange eyes, they say, and it's a lot easier to identify Skinwalkers when they're in their animal shapeshifted form because of their red glowing eyes. So could they have been seeing a bunch of Skinwalkers? It's potentially the case. Potentially. And earlier we had mentioned cow mutilations. So Bigelow and his group, they actually were like, okay, let's keep cattle on the ranch. So they themselves brought a herd of cattle onto the ranch. And this was one of the most fascinating things to Bigelow. And it's one of the most fascinating things that continues to happen today. This type of mutilation and like exactly what happens to the cow. And we're lucky enough that Bigelow and his group, they did actually report on this. So let's get into the story of one of the cattle mutilations. So the ranch manager under Bigelow, he tagged the cattle herd one day, and say roughly about an hour later, one of the cows had actually been found dead. But here's the thing, the cow was disemboweled. And again, get this, there was no blood found around the incident. And when they had checked the cow had no blood. So the cow was essentially drained of all of its blood, and there were no like incision marks. There was no trail. Like if you do that to an animal, like you're bound to leave some kind of evidence, like not even one drop of blood, not nowhere near or away from this. It's really interesting. And these strange deaths to cows, they keep happening, and that is characteristic to Skinwalker Ranch. And I don't have any other examples of any mutilations, but I do want to talk about a few, or like one at least. And that is that this is very common, and it's really odd because they'll find a cow that has been mutilated, and like the cow's perfectly fine, like it just like passed away. But then when you do an autopsy, it's like, wait, this cow has no organs. All of its organs have been taken out, but there's like no incision or anything in the cow. It's really odd. It's very odd. So that is one of the things that luckily they did provide us with. Now, Bigelow and his team, unlike the previous owners, and obviously because of the time that we're in, this is like really late 90s going into the 2000s, they had a lot of, equipment and technology and things that the other ones didn't have. So that, of course, they had an advantage there. But one of the things that is very common with paranormal activity and like supernatural activity is that equipment and technology, they will malfunction, they will somehow end up broken, they'll go missing, their batteries, like you just put a fresh battery into your camera, the battery instantly dies. That is very characteristic of like paranormal activity and all those kinds of things, and it was happening here. So, an employee that worked there at the ranch under Bigelow, he even said that it felt like kind of something was sabotaging them before a phenomenon would happen. So they knew that whenever this happened, that something was about to happen. A UFO could appear, paranormal activity could happen, something was going to happen on the ranch, but they didn't know what, and they couldn't capture it sometimes because their equipment was simply just not work. So I found that quite interesting, but also really good because that's something that happens to a lot of teams, and it was happening to them. So it was good to see and interesting, really. But this is pretty much the end of the info on what was seen and what went down under the ranch under Bigelow. Because you know what happens now? The government comes. Yep, so the government is now involved at Skinwalker Ranch. Wonderful, right? So, in 2007, Bigelow was contacted by an agent from the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency. That's too long. So from now on, the DIA. They're just going to be known as the DIA. Got it? The U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA. Yeah. So this agent, he himself was curious about the research that Bigelow was conducting there, and he wanted to visit. And it is said, and it has been documented, that during this agent's visit, he himself had a close encounter with a UFO, or an orb of sorts. So of course, he then goes back with this experience that he had. He goes back to the DIA, he reports this, and the government is now closely watching Skinwalker Ranch. And soon after this whole thing went down, the DIA formed the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Say it with me, everybody, ATIP, because we are not saying that again. Too long. Again, ATIP. This is ATIP. Now, ATIP was headed by Bigelow's friend, a senator, Henry Reed. Now, this is juicy. This is like kind of gossipy. But like under ATIP, $22 million was given to Skinwalker Ranch to study the phenomena on the ranch. So ATIP from 2007 to 2012 was conducting, research on UFOs and UAPs. I believe that's the new term that people are using, unidentified aerial phenomena. So UAPs as well. But ATIP did lose funding in 2012. And with the government kind of heading out of the area, we don't know anything that the government got, by the way. It's all classified information. We don't know a thing. So from 2007 to 2012, we know nothing. So I literally can't even tell you anything because we don't know. I'm assuming they got something good. Lots of good things, but we don't know. So yeah. So Bigelow, even though he lost the government funding and sponsorship, he's a wealthy man. He continued doing research there with his own money and his new company, Bigelow Aerospace. Yeah, so that continued. But pretty much we don't know anything that happened under the government's time. It's all classified, but we can speculate. And I speculate they saw aliens. Actually, I don't know about that, but it could have happened. Can't tell me no because we don't have a no answer or a yes answer. We don't know anything, so possibility. So moving up to 2016, an interesting move was made by Robert Bigelow. He sells Skinwalker Ranch to Brandon Fugal. Now, I know Brandon Fugal actually quite well because of what we're going to cover right now. Personally, no, we don't know each other. But because of what I'm going to cover right now, I know this guy. I know him pretty well. So, under Fugal, a show, The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch, it attempts to find answers about what is going on. So the show is currently ongoing, and I myself I really love the show. I actually really highly recommend it. Watch it. There are so many things that have happened on Skinwalker Ranch that they've caught. So it's basically it's like real time discovery and exploration and like scientific experiments and all of this on the ranch, like trying to figure out what's going on the ranch. Real time, kind of like they record it, and everything that they find is part of the show. So Fugal himself, he has like that same mindset that Bigelow has, but he is broadcasting, the findings and discoveries, and I really appreciate that. I like someone that's pretty open about what's going on and what they're finding and all of that, and Fugal's that man. So yeah, I do recommend seeing that show because stuff has happened. When I tell you that cow mutilations have happened and they're crazy, I'm talking about that show. I've seen so many cows die on that show and die in interesting ways and been shown that like to my face. Like it's wild. It is crazy. But I do highly recommend that show, and the show is still ongoing. So I am currently waiting for new episodes because I am highly invested in this. Okay? Highly invested. But as I was saying, many experts from many different fields, they appear on the show, and that's another thing. Like I find it really refreshing to see them actually like going in to test like, if certain things can be debunked or not, and like what's going on. Hey, there might be like a secret military bunker that the US government like built here, and there's radioactivity like coming out of it. Like what is there's lots of things, and it's really nice for them to, at least it seems like they're being transparent about everything that they're finding. It doesn't seem like anything's fake. I mean, everything could be fake, who knows? But it's just really refreshing to see that kind of thing, So yeah, I highly recommend watching the show. But with that being said, believe it or not, that's it. That is Skinwalker Ranch. So I just want to cover a few things before we do finish. And that is, the controversy, the skepticism. Is it true? Do we believe the reports and stuff? I believe that what is happening at Skinwalker Ranch is happening. I believe it. I am, of course, also a little bit skeptical. I feel like sometimes things can be blown out of proportion. But as I said, there is this energy, and they even cover it in the show. There's definitely like different magnetic fields and energy fields that are kind of like, it feels like they're converging on the ranch. So I feel like that can also kind of mess with the human mind. So maybe you blow things out of proportion. Like maybe you did see a UFO, but now you're saying that you've seen 30 UFOs a day. Maybe you did see a UFO, but also these magnetic waves and electric waves and all this energy could be messing with you, and like you could be seeing things that you aren't actually seeing, but it's not your fault. You know what I mean? So I feel like there's definitely something going on. And I would love to go there one day. I would love to go there one day. Brandon Fugel, if you ever see this, please invite me to Skinwalker Ranch. I would be honored to go and do some research there with you guys. Record some videos, you know? Skinwalker Ranch vlogs. Like I want to be there. Like I want to experience these things myself. So if you're watching, I am open to investigation, okay? I'm open, highly interested in this, okay? But again, there's also skepticism because, as we said, the Myers, they themselves didn't experience anything. But during the Native American times, there were some things happening. You know, they themselves also saw some lights or orbs, and they had the skinwalkers back then too. So it's really all so confusing, you know, like, could it be real? Yes. Do I believe it's mostly all real? Yes. But there's also so many other things going on. So it's all a whole thing, you know? But there are, you know, good points for the skeptical people. You know, there are good points and things that they point to because, hey, you know, there are some things that kind of do seem like it's just unrealistic, or hey, the Myers never experienced anything for 6 decades. So, you know, it is what it is. And now most of the things that were covered and lots of the focus on Skinwalker Ranch is definitely with the UFOs and, you know, that supernatural kind of activity and the creatures. But there's also paranormal activity on there. There's many old buildings there, also many abandoned buildings, and Ghost Adventures, as I mentioned, they went there and I think they did a good job of capturing the whole experience that is Skinwalker Ranch, you know, the paranormal, which other places don't necessarily focus on very much, but there is paranormal activity. And I would also love to, you know, get more insight into that and look at that, and maybe the paranormal activity is being influenced, or like something's happening with that, and per se, you know, like the UFOs and these portals that the Shermans had seen in the sky. Like there's just so many converging elements happening here, and you know, people don't really pay attention to the paranormal, but I would love more insight into that. And maybe that will help us have a clearer picture of the whole thing, you know? So there's also that. But with that being said, that is Skinwalker Ranch. Now I want to thank you guys for joining and staying all the way to the end. I'm extremely happy to be back doing these kinds of videos. These are some of my, you know, favorite things, bringing some of my personal interest into the channel and being able to, you know, really dive into this and all that. It's amazing. So I'm really happy to be here and doing this, and I can't wait to continue, and I hope you guys enjoyed. And of course, if you guys watched all the way to the end, I want you guys to leave down below other topics you would like me to cover. I already have a long list of things that I came up with already, but I would love to know what you guys want to see as well. Trust me, I'm open to so many things. So please, if you watched all the way to the end, you know, let me know down below what other kinds of places, paranormal activity, UFOs, creatures, list goes on and on. You know, let me know what you guys want to see from me. But Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. And until the next one, adios, anabelas, and stay safe from those skinwalkers.
Spin about 2-3 times to make sure all the cancers gone.